London throbbed with its usual frenetic energy. Double-decker buses lumbered through the streets, their red paint gleaming under a surprisingly generous summer sun. Tourists, a kaleidoscope of nationalities and languages, thronged the sidewalks, maps clutched in their hands, cameras poised to capture every iconic landmark. The air buzzed with the sounds of the city. The rumble of traffic, the chirping of birds in Hyde Park, the distant strains of a street musician's guitar. Amidst this vibrant chaos stood a figure of unwavering stillness. A royal guard, resplendent in his scarlet tunic and bearskin hat, posted outside Buckingham Palace. He was a study in contrasts to the surrounding frenzy immobile, his face an impassive mask. He represented centuries of tradition and unwavering duty. His presence was a silent testament to the enduring power of the monarchy, a symbol recognized and respected the world over. The tourists, naturally, were drawn to him. They posed for photos mimicking his stoic posture, whispering jokes about his unflinching gaze that he remained unmoved, a statue of discipline in a sea of playful irreverence. Unbeknownst to the bustling crowds, and certainly unknown to the guard himself, a storm was brewing on the horizon, a storm of idiocy and reckless ambition that arrived in the form of a young man, fresh off a long-haul flight, his head filled with visions of viral fame that he weaved through the throngs of people, his eyes scanning the scene, a smirk playing on his lips that he was a digital native, raised on the currency of likes and shares, convinced that any act, no matter how outrageous, was justifiable in the pursuit of online validation. He had come to London with a plan so breathtakingly stupid that it defied belief, that he intended to create a spectacle, a moment of shocking absurdity that would catapult him to internet stardom, his target. The very symbol of British tradition and stoicism standing before him. The Royal Guard, his weapon? A combination of readily available lighter fluid and a complete lack of common sense. The fuse was lit, the clock was ticking, and the collision between tradition and online infamy was about to occur, with disastrous consequences for all involved. His name was Jake, though online he was known as Prankmaster Global. Hailing from the sun-kissed shores of California, Jake embodied the archetype of the internet-addicted youth, his life meticulously curated for the consumption of his followers. He was 22 years old, perpetually clad in branded streetwear, and rarely seen without his phone glued to his hand. His sun-bleached hair and perpetually grinning face masked a deep-seated insecurity and a desperate need for validation. Jake wasn't inherently malicious, but he was undeniably obnoxious and relentlessly attention-seeking. He saw the world as a stage, and himself as the star of a never-ending reality show. His YouTube channel was a repository of poorly executed pranks, ranging from mildly irritating to downright offensive. There was the time he replaced a stranger's coffee with soy sauce, the video of him accidentally tripping over a street performer's guitar case, and the infamous incident where he released a swarm of crickets in a library. Each stunt was meticulously planned, filmed, and edited, all in the pursuit of views, likes, and subscribers. His online persona was carefully crafted. The lovable rogue, the mischievous prankster, the guy who was just having fun. But behind the carefully curated image was a young man desperately craving attention, willing to cross any line to achieve his 15 minutes of fame. He thrived on the adrenaline rush of pulling off a prank, the fleeting validation of online applause, and the temporary escape from his own unremarkable existence. His previous stunts had garnered him a modest following, enough to fuel his ego but not enough to satisfy his insatiable hunger for recognition. He needed something bigger, something bolder, something that would truly break the internet. That's what brought him to London, to the heart of British tradition, with a plan so outrageous that it could either make him a star or land him in serious trouble. He saw the Royal Guard not as a symbol of national pride, but as a prop in his latest production, a means to an end in his relentless pursuit of viral fame. He believed he was untouchable, shielded by the anonymity of the internet and the perceived invincibility of youth. He was about to learn a very harsh lesson. Jake's brilliant plan, hatched during a caffeine-fueled brainstorming session in his Los Angeles apartment, was breathtaking in its simplicity and staggering in its stupidity. It involved a can of readily available lighter fluid, a cheap lighter purchased from a corner store, and a pre-planned, 15-second video that he envisioned would explode across the internet. The core of the prank was this. Jake would surreptitiously approach the Royal Guard, spray a small amount of lighter fluid onto the bearskin hat, ensuring, in his warped logic, that it wouldn't actually harm the guard, and then flicked the lighter. The resulting brief burst of flame, captured on camera, would be edited to dramatic effect, complete with slow-motion replays and a catchy soundtrack. The title, Royal Guard Gets Lit. Gone wrong? The question mark was crucial, he believed, adding an element of suspense and plausible deniability. He genuinely believed this was comedic gold. He envisioned millions of views, thousands of new subscribers, and perhaps even a coveted spot on a morning talk show. He had even rehearsed his response to potential criticism. It was just a joke? Bro. No one got hurt. Lighten up. The sheer lack of forethought was astounding. He hadn't considered the potential consequences of his actions. The risk of actually injuring the guard, the possibility of causing a public panic, or the legal ramifications of assaulting a member of the military. He hadn't even bothered to research the history or significance of the Royal Guard, viewing them simply as inanimate props in his quest for viral fame. His understanding of British culture was equally superficial, gleaned from watching episodes of The Crown and Love Island. He assumed that the Brits, known for their dry wit and self-deprecating humor, would appreciate his audacious prank. He failed to grasp the deep-seated respect for tradition and authority that underpinned British society, or the potential outrage his actions would provoke. He was operating in a bubble of American internet culture, oblivious to the real-world implications of his digital ambitions. He was so blinded by the promise of viral fame that he couldn't see the gaping chasm of stupidity that lay before him. With the lighter fluid tucked discreetly into his jacket pocket and the lighter nestled in his palm, Jake began his approach. He moved through the crowd with a feigned nonchalance, his eyes fixed on the stoic figure of the Royal Guard. His accomplice, a nervous-looking teenager named Ethan he'd met online and convinced to help with promises of exposure, trailed a few steps behind, clutching his phone, ready to capture the moment of internet glory. The air crackled with a nervous energy that only Jake seemed to thrive on. Ethan, on the other hand, was visibly apprehensive. His face pale and his hands trembling, he kept glancing around, as if expecting the police to swoop in at any moment. Jake, noticing his discomfort, shot him a reassuring wink. "Relax, dude," he whispered. "This is going to be epic." Jake circled the guard, feigning interest in the architecture of Buckingham Palace, all the while calculating the optimal angle of attack. He needed to be close enough to spray the lighter fluid accurately, but far enough away to avoid immediate detection. He mumbled to Ethan, barely moving his lips. "All right, here's the plan. I'm going to go in on my mark. You ready?" Ethan swallowed hard and gave a weak nod. He adjusted the phone's camera settings, his fingers fumbling with the touchscreen. The crowd around them continued to bustle, oblivious to the impending act of idiocy about to unfold. Children pointed and giggled at the guard, tourists posed for photos, and pigeons pecked at crumbs on the pavement. Jake took a deep breath, attempting to project an air of confidence he didn't truly feel. He straightened his shoulders, plastered a wide grin on his face, and began to close the distance. He imagined the viral headlines, the flood of comments, the feeling of finally achieving the internet fame he so desperately craved. He was so focused on his vision of online glory that he failed to notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the almost imperceptible tightening of security around the guard, the growing sense of unease in the air. The stage was set, the cameras were rolling, and the curtain was about to rise on a performance that would end in spectacular failure. The moment arrived. Jake, with a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins, took the final steps towards the unsuspecting Royal Guard. He feigned a stumble, using the maneuver to get close enough to execute his idiotic plan with a quick, almost imperceptible movement. He reached into his jacket pocket, retrieved the can of lighter fluid, and gave it a short, controlled burst. The spray, thankfully, was less voluminous than he'd anticipated, barely dampening the dense fur of the bearskin hat. But the smell, a pungent chemical odor, was unmistakable. Jake, heart pounding, quickly palmed the lighter and flicked the wheel. A small, pathetic flame sputtered to life. For a split second, time seemed to slow to a crawl. The flame danced precariously close to the treated fur. Then, with a barely audible whoosh, a small area of the hat ignited. The flame was small, contained, almost comical in its insignificance. But it was there, a flickering testament to Jake's monumental stupidity. The Royal Guard, however, remained unmoved. He didn't flinch, didn't twitch, didn't even blink. He stood as still and impassive as he had before, a statue of unwavering duty in the face of absurd provocation. His training had prepared him for countless scenarios, but surely not for this. He had been taught to withstand the elements, to ignore the taunts of tourists, to maintain composure in the face of potential threats. But to be set subtly ablaze by a fame-hungry idiot, that was a new one. The lack of immediate reaction was almost more shocking than the act itself. Jake, expecting a dramatic outburst, a moment of chaotic panic, was momentarily stunned. He stood there, lighter still in his hand, a look of bewildered confusion on his face. He had achieved his goal. He had captured the moment on camera, thanks to Ethan's shaky but functional filming, but the desired effect was conspicuously absent. The internet wasn't broken, the world wasn't watching. The royal guard was simply standing there, with a small flame flickering atop his head. But the calm wouldn't last. The moment of bewildered calm shattered with the force of a thunderclap. The subtle shift in the atmosphere that Jake had failed to notice escalated into a full-blown security response. The seemingly static royal guard, it turned out, was anything but alone. Within milliseconds of the flame appearing, two other guards, previously positioned discreetly amongst the tourists, sprang into action. They moved with a speed and precision that belied their ceremonial appearance. One guard, with a guttural roar, tackled Jake from the side, sending him sprawling onto the pavement. The lighter skittered away, landing harmlessly near a pigeon pecking at the ground. The second guard, simultaneously, moved to extinguish the tiny flame on the bearskin hat, swatting it out with a swift, practiced motion. Simultaneously, uniformed police officers, who had also been strategically positioned nearby, converged on the scene. The entire operation was a well-rehearsed ballet of security, designed to neutralize any threat with swift and decisive action. Before Jake could even process what was happening, he found himself pinned to the ground, his face pressed against the cold stone, the weight of the guard heavy on his back. The world spun. The sounds of London, previously a background hum, intensified into a cacophony of sirens, shouts, and the clicking of camera shutters. He could hear Ethan, his voice a high-pitched squeal of panic, yelling something about artistic expression before the sound was cut off abruptly. Ethan, realizing the gravity of the situation, had made the only rational decision of the entire day. He sprinted through the crowd, weaving between startled tourists. His phone still clutched in his hand, he disappeared into the maze of London streets, leaving Jake to face the music alone. Jake, his face scraped and his ego shattered, was hauled to his feet by the police. Handcuffs were snapped onto his wrists. The prank master global was no more. He was just another idiot, facing serious charges in a foreign country, his dreams of viral fame dissolving into a nightmare of legal repercussions. The tackle was swift, the arrest was immediate, and the consequences were about to be devastating. The crowd, initially stunned into silence by the sudden burst of action, quickly erupted into a cacophony of emotions. Shock gave way to anger, confusion morphed into outrage. The collective gasp that had rippled through the onlookers transformed into a chorus of condemnation. The air, thick with tension moments before, now vibrated with collective indignation. Cell phones, previously used to capture innocent tourist snapshots, were now weaponized, recording every detail of Jake's arrest. The flashing lights of the police cars reflected in the lenses, creating a dizzying spectacle of flashing lights and accusatory stares. The onlookers, a diverse mix of nationalities and backgrounds, were united in their disgust for Jake's actions. Disgraceful! One woman shouted, her voice trembling with anger. How dare he disrespect our traditions like that? A burly man, his face flushed with fury, muttered something about deportation and throwing away the key. A group of teenagers, who had been laughing and joking moments before, now stood in stunned silence, their faces etched with disbelief. The crowd's anger was palpable, a tangible force that seemed to press down on Jake as he was led away by the police. He could feel their collective gaze burning into him, their silent judgment more damning than any verbal accusation. He had sought their attention, their validation, their admiration instead. He had earned their contempt, their scorn, their utter disdain. Many in the crowd voiced their support for the royal guard, applauding his composure and resilience in the face of such a blatant act of disrespect. Some even approached the other guards, offering words of encouragement and gratitude. The incident, intended to create division and chaos, had ironically served to strengthen the community's bond and reinforce their appreciation for their cultural heritage. The videos of the arrest, taken from countless angles, began to circulate online within minutes. The hashtag Royal Guard assault quickly trended on Twitter, accompanied by a torrent of angry comments and denunciations. Jake's attempt at viral fame had backfired spectacularly. He had become a pariah, an object of universal ridicule and condemnation. The crowd, both in the physical world and online, had spoken, and their message was clear. His actions were unacceptable, his behavior was reprehensible, and his dreams of internet glory were about to be extinguished in a blaze of public shame. Behind the impassive mask, behind the centuries of tradition and the unwavering stoicism, there was a man, Private Thomas Ashton, 20-year-old from a small village in Yorkshire, was the royal guard who had been targeted by Jake's pathetic prank. He had been standing there, motionless, for nearly an hour, enduring the summer heat, the endless stream of tourists, and the occasional whispered insult. His mind, however, was far from empty. He was constantly scanning the crowd, assessing potential threats, running through emergency protocols. He was trained to observe, to anticipate, to react with unwavering precision. He was a soldier, first and foremost, and his duty was to protect the monarchy and uphold the traditions of his regiment. The lighter fluid, the sudden burst of flame, it registered in his mind as a potential attack, a breach of security. But years of rigorous training kicked in instantly. Panic was not an option. Fear was a luxury he could not afford. His primary objective was to maintain composure, to assess the situation, and to allow his fellow guards and the police to neutralize the threat that he felt. The heat on his bearskin hat, the pungent smell of the lighter fluid, the fleeting sensation of the flame. But he remained still, his face an impassive mask that he knew that any visible reaction would only embolden the attacker, potentially escalating the situation and endangering the public. His training had ingrained in him the importance of discipline, the power of restraint, the unwavering commitment to duty. That he thought briefly of his family back home, of his mother who proudly displayed his photograph in uniform on the mantelpiece, of his younger brother who idolized him. He couldn't let them down. He couldn't let his regiment down. He couldn't let his country down. As the other guards tackled Jake and the police moved in to make the arrest, a wave of relief washed over him. The threat was neutralized. The situation was under control. He allowed himself a momentary, almost imperceptible sigh that he knew that the incident would be investigated, that he would be questioned, that he would be subjected to intense scrutiny. But he also knew that he had performed his duty to the best of his ability. He had maintained his composure. He had upheld the traditions of his regiment, and he had protected the public. He was a royal guard, and he was proud. The story exploded. Within hours, Jake's ill-conceived prank had become a global sensation, albeit for all the wrong reasons. The videos captured by bystanders, raw and unfiltered, spread like wildfire across social media platforms, news websites, and television broadcasts. The world watched in disbelief as the footage of Jake's arrest played on a continuous loop, each replay fueling the growing outrage. "American tourist attempts to set Royal Guard on fire," screamed the headlines. "Idiot YouTuber faces serious charges in London." The story dominated news cycles, overshadowing political debates, economic reports, and even celebrity scandals. It was a perfect storm of cultural clash, internet idiocy, and blatant disrespect for tradition. The outrage was palpable, transcending national borders and cultural differences. People from all corners of the globe condemned Jake's actions, expressing their solidarity with the Royal Guard and their disgust for his reckless behavior. News anchors furrowed their brows in disapproval, political commentators decried the erosion of respect for authority, and social media influencers issued carefully worded statements condemning the prank. The condemnation wasn't limited to the mainstream media. Online forums and comment sections were flooded with angry messages, many of them directed at Jake personally. His social media accounts were bombarded with insults, threats, and accusations. His past pranks were unearthed and dissected, each one adding fuel to the fire of public outrage. Even celebrities weighed in on the controversy, using their platforms to express their disgust and support for the Royal Guard. Actors, musicians, and athletes shared their thoughts on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, further amplifying the global condemnation. The story had become a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of everything that was wrong with the internet age. Jake's face, once plastered with a self-satisfied grin, was now a symbol of shame and disgrace. His name, once synonymous with online mischief, was now associated with recklessness, stupidity, and blatant disrespect. His dreams of viral fame had come true, but not in the way he had ever imagined. He had become a global laughingstock, an object of universal scorn, a cautionary tale for the internet age. The media frenzy was relentless, unforgiving, and utterly devastating. The legal ramifications of Jake's actions were swift and severe. He found himself facing a battery of charges, each carrying potentially lengthy prison sentences. What began as a misguided attempt at internet fame had spiraled into a full-blown legal nightmare. The primary charge was assault, specifically assault on a member of the armed forces. This charge alone carried a significant prison sentence, particularly given the symbolic importance of the Royal Guard. The prosecution argued that Jake's actions constituted a deliberate and unprovoked attack on a representative of the British state. Furthermore, Jake was charged with endangering public safety. The act of setting fire to anything in a public place, especially in a densely populated area like the vicinity of Buckingham Palace, was considered a serious threat to the safety of the public. The prosecution emphasized the potential for the fire to spread, causing injury or even death to bystanders. Perhaps the most serious and controversial charge was the potential application of terrorism-related offenses. While it was unlikely that Jake was motivated by any political or ideological agenda, the prosecution argued that his actions could be interpreted as an attempt to intimidate and disrupt the normal functioning of society. The fact that he had targeted a symbol of British tradition and authority added weight to this argument. The possible sentences ranged from several years in prison to, in the most extreme scenario, a life sentence. The final decision rested with the judge, who would take into account the severity of the crime, Jake's motives, his prior criminal record or lack thereof, and any mitigating circumstances. The legal proceedings were further complicated by the international dimension of the case. As an American citizen, Jake was entitled to certain consular protections, but the British authorities made it clear that they intended to prosecute him to the full extent of the law. The U.S. government, while offering consular assistance, distanced itself from Jake's actions, recognizing the gravity of the situation and the potential for diplomatic fallout. Jake, who had once envisioned himself as a YouTube sensation, now found himself facing the very real prospect of spending years behind bars in a foreign prison. The legal consequences of his actions were a stark and sobering reminder that even the most idiotic pranks can have devastating real-world repercussions. Faced with the daunting reality of his legal predicament, Jake's defense team scrambled to construct a plausible defense. However, weak. Their options were limited, given the overwhelming evidence against him and the intense public scrutiny of the case. The primary line of defense was to claim that the incident was just a joke, a misguided attempt at humor that had been misinterpreted. They argued that Jake never intended to harm the Royal Guard and that the flame was small and quickly extinguished, posing no real threat. This defense, however, was undermined by Jake's previous online pranks, which demonstrated a pattern of reckless and attention-seeking behavior. Another potential defense was to plead cultural misunderstanding. The defense team argued that Jake, as an American tourist, was unfamiliar with British customs and traditions and that he failed to appreciate the symbolic importance of the Royal Guard. They claimed that his actions were born out of ignorance rather than malice. This defense, however, was met with skepticism, as the iconic status of the Royal Guard was widely known, even outside of the UK. A more desperate line of defense involved exploring the possibility of mental instability. The defense team commissioned a psychological evaluation of Jake, hoping to uncover any underlying mental health issues that could explain his bizarre behavior. They argued that Jake's obsession with online fame and his disregard for consequences could be indicative of a deeper psychological problem. This defense, however, was a long shot, as there was no prior evidence of mental illness and Jake's actions appeared to be driven by a calculated desire for attention rather than a genuine mental breakdown. The defense team also attempted to portray Jake as a naive and impressionable young man who had been led astray by the allure of internet fame. They argued that he was a victim of social media culture, which rewarded outrageous behavior and normalized the pursuit of online validation at any cost. This defense, however, failed to resonate with the public, who saw Jake as a responsible adult who had made a conscious decision to break the law. Ultimately, Jake's defense was a patchwork of weak arguments and desperate pleas, none of which were particularly convincing. The overwhelming evidence against him, the intense public outrage, and the severity of the charges made it exceedingly difficult to mount a credible defense that he had dug himself into a deep hole, and it was unlikely that any amount of legal maneuvering could save him from the consequences of his actions. Private Thomas Ashton, the royal guard who had been the target of Jake's prank, was called upon to provide a formal statement to the court. His testimony was crucial to the prosecution's case, as it provided a first-hand account of the incident and highlighted the potential danger posed by Jake's actions. Dressed in his full ceremonial uniform, Private Ashton entered the courtroom with a quiet dignity that commanded respect. He stood ramrod straight as he took the oath. His gaze unwavering, he spoke clearly and concisely. His voice betraying no emotion, he recounted the events of that day, describing how he had been standing on duty outside Buckingham Palace when he noticed a man acting suspiciously in the crowd. He detailed how the man had approached him, sprayed a liquid on his bearskin hat, and then ignited it with a lighter. He emphasized that, at the time, he had no way of knowing the man's intentions. He had to assume that it was a deliberate attack, potentially part of a larger terrorist plot. He explained how his training had kicked in, allowing him to remain calm and composed despite the immediate danger. My primary concern, he stated, was the safety of the public and the security of the palace. I had to assess the situation quickly and determine the best course of action. Any visible reaction on my part could have escalated the situation and potentially endangered others. He also spoke about the impact of the incident on his duty. He explained that the Royal Guard represented a symbol of British tradition and authority, and that any attack on the Guard was an attack on those values. He emphasized the importance of maintaining the integrity and dignity of the Guard, and the need to deter others from attempting similar acts of disrespect. We are not just statues, he stated firmly. We are soldiers, trained to protect our country and uphold our traditions. We take our duty very seriously, and we will not tolerate any attempt to undermine our mission. Private Ashton's testimony was powerful and persuasive. His calm demeanor, his unwavering commitment to duty, and his clear articulation of the potential danger posed by Jake's actions left a lasting impression on the jury. He had transformed from a silent symbol into a compelling witness, providing a human face to the story and underscoring the gravity of Jake's offense. To further humanize Private Ashton and highlight the positive impact he had on his community, the prosecution called upon several character witnesses to testify. These individuals, who knew Ashton personally, painted a portrait of a dedicated soldier, a selfless volunteer, and a positive role model. First to take the stand was Mrs. Eleanor Davies, Ashton's former head teacher from his village primary school. She spoke of a bright and diligent student, always eager to learn and help others. Thomas was a model pupil, she recalled, her voice filled with pride. He was kind, respectful, and always willing to go the extra mile. Even at a young age, he showed a strong sense of duty and a deep respect for his community. Next, Sergeant Major Robert Jenkins, Ashton's commanding officer, testified to his exceptional service record and unwavering dedication to the Royal Guard. Private Ashton is one of the finest soldiers in my company, he stated emphatically. He is highly disciplined, incredibly reliable, and always puts the needs of his unit before his own. He embodies the values of the Royal Guard: courage, loyalty, and unwavering commitment to duty. A local youth worker, Sarah Miller, spoke of Ashton's volunteer work at the village community center. She described how he had dedicated his free time to mentoring young people, organizing sports activities, and providing support to disadvantaged families. Thomas is a true inspiration to our young people, she said. He shows them that anything is possible with hard work and dedication. He is a positive role model and a valuable asset to our community. Finally, Ashton's mother, Margaret Ashton, took the stand, her voice trembling with emotion. She spoke of her son's unwavering love for his country, his deep sense of honor, and his unwavering commitment to his family. Thomas has always been a good son, she said, her eyes glistening with tears. He makes us so proud. He is a kind, caring, and compassionate young man. He would never do anything to hurt anyone. The character witness testimonies painted a vivid picture of Private Ashton as a man of exceptional character, a dedicated soldier, and a valuable member of his community. They served to counter any attempt to portray him as a faceless symbol, highlighting his humanity and underscoring the injustice of Jake's actions. The jury was left with no doubt that Private Ashton was a man of integrity, deserving of their respect and their support. While Jake faced the formal legal proceedings, a parallel trial was unfolding online, a brutal and unforgiving reckoning in the court of public opinion. The social media backlash against him was swift, relentless, and deeply personal. His online presence, once a source of pride and validation, became a target for relentless attacks. His social media accounts were flooded with hateful messages, ranging from insults and threats to outright calls for violence. His photos were photoshopped and memed, transforming him into a grotesque caricature of his former self. His past pranks, previously viewed as harmless antics by his followers, were now dissected and condemned as evidence of his recklessness and lack of empathy. Videos of him harassing strangers, vandalizing property, and engaging in other questionable behavior were re-uploaded and shared widely, further fueling the online outrage. The online hate extended beyond his social media accounts, spilling over into his personal life. His family's address was leaked online, resulting in a barrage of threatening phone calls and hate mail. His friends and associates were harassed and bullied, forcing them to distance themselves from him. The impact on Jake's life was devastating. He lost his online following, his sponsorships, and his source of income. He became a social pariah, unable to go out in public without being recognized and ridiculed. He suffered from anxiety, depression, and insomnia. He was a broken man. His dreams of internet fame shattered beyond repair. The online backlash served as a stark reminder of the power and the perils of social media. It demonstrated the speed and intensity with which online outrage can spread, and the devastating impact it can have on an individual's life. It also raised questions about the ethics of online shaming and the responsibility of social media platforms to protect their users from abuse. While Jake's actions were undoubtedly reprehensible, the online hate directed at him often crossed the line into harassment and abuse. The social media mob, fueled by righteous indignation, seemed determined to destroy him completely, oblivious to the potential consequences of their actions. The online backlash, while perhaps understandable, served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked online outrage and the corrosive effects of social media shaming. While Jake languished in a London jail cell, facing the consequences of his actions, the police investigation turned its attention to his accomplice, Ethan. The young man who had filmed the incident and then fled the scene was now a wanted man, facing potential charges of aiding and abetting and conspiracy to commit assault. The police launched a full-scale manhunt, utilizing CCTV footage, social media analysis, and witness testimonies to track down Ethan's whereabouts. They knew that he was likely scared and desperate, and that he might be attempting to leave the country or seek refuge with friends or family. The investigation quickly revealed Ethan's identity. Ethan Miller, a 19-year-old from a small town in Ohio, he was described as a shy and introverted young man, easily influenced by others. He had met Jake online through a forum for aspiring YouTubers and had been drawn in by Jake's promises of fame and fortune. The police contacted Ethan's family in Ohio, who were shocked and distraught by the news. They cooperated fully with the investigation, providing information about Ethan's online activities and his possible travel plans. They pleaded with him to turn himself in, assuring him that they would support him through the legal process. The CCTV footage from the vicinity of Buckingham Palace provided crucial clues to Ethan's escape route. The police were able to trace his movements through the crowded streets of London, eventually pinpointing his last known location near Victoria Station. They launched a search of the area, interviewing local residents and shopkeepers and checking train and bus schedules. They also alerted border control authorities, instructing them to be on the lookout for Ethan at airports and seaports. After several days of intense investigation, Ethan was finally apprehended. He was found hiding in a budget hotel room near Heathrow Airport, waiting for a flight back to the United States. He surrendered peacefully, admitting his involvement in the prank and expressing remorse for his actions. Ethan's arrest brought a sense of closure to the investigation, but it also raised further questions about the role of social media in encouraging reckless behavior. He was just a teenager, easily swayed by the allure of online fame. He had made a terrible mistake, and now he would have to face the consequences. The accomplice hunt was over, but the legal proceedings were just beginning. The case of Jake, the Californian YouTuber who attempted to set a royal guard on fire, had the potential to escalate beyond a simple criminal matter and develop into a diplomatic incident. The severity of the charges he faced, coupled with the intense media attention and the strong public sentiment in both the UK and the US, created a delicate situation that required careful handling by both governments. The US government, while obligated to provide consular assistance to Jake as an American citizen, was keen to avoid any impression of condoning his actions. The State Department issued a statement condemning the incident and reaffirming its respect for British law and traditions. They emphasized that Jake's actions were those of an individual and did not reflect the views or values of the American people. The British government, on the other hand, was determined to uphold the rule of law and send a strong message that such behavior would not be tolerated. They were under pressure from the public to ensure that Jake faced appropriate punishment for his actions. The potential for diplomatic fallout arose from several factors. Firstly, the severity of the charges against Jake, particularly the possibility of terrorism-related offenses, could be seen as an overreaction by some in the U.S. Concerns were raised that Jake was being made a scapegoat, and that the British authorities were using his case to send a message about the importance of respecting their traditions. Secondly, the intense media coverage and the strong public sentiment in both countries created a highly charged atmosphere. Any perceived mishandling of the case by either government could have triggered a backlash from the public and the media. Thirdly, the US and the UK had a long and complex history of diplomatic relations. While the two countries were close allies, there were also occasional disagreements and tensions. The Jake incident had the potential to exacerbate these tensions, particularly if the US government was seen to be interfering in the British legal process. To mitigate the risk of diplomatic fallout, both governments engaged in careful diplomacy behind the scenes. They maintained open lines of communication, exchanged information, and sought to reassure each other of their commitment to upholding the rule of law. They also worked to manage public expectations, emphasizing the importance of allowing the legal process to run its course without undue interference. The case of Jake, the reckless tourist, had become a test of the strength and resilience of the special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. The trial of Jake, the prankmaster global, became a media circus, attracting reporters from around the world. The courtroom was packed each day, filled with journalists, legal observers, and curious onlookers eager to witness the unfolding drama. The prosecution presented a compelling case, meticulously outlining the events leading up to the incident and emphasizing the severity of Jake's actions. They argued that he had deliberately targeted a symbol of British tradition and authority, endangering public safety and causing significant distress. They presented video evidence, witness testimonies, and expert analysis to support their claims. The prosecution's key arguments focused on the premeditated nature of the prank, Jake's lack of remorse, and the potential for his actions to inspire copycat behavior. They argued that a strong sentence was necessary to deter others from attempting similar acts of disrespect and violence. The defense, on the other hand, struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence against their client. They continued to argue that the incident was a joke that had been misinterpreted, that Jake was unfamiliar with British culture, and that he suffered from mental health issues. The defense's key arguments centered on mitigating circumstances, portraying Jake as a misguided youth who had been led astray by the allure of internet fame. They presented expert testimony from a psychologist who claimed that Jake suffered from an attention-seeking personality disorder. Witness testimonies played a crucial role in the trial. Private Thomas Ashton's calm and dignified account of the incident had a powerful impact on the jury. The character witnesses who testified on Ashton's behalf further humanized him and underscored the injustice of Jake's actions. Jake himself took the stand in his own defense. He appeared subdued and remorseful, a stark contrast to his confident and arrogant online persona. He apologized for his actions, claiming that he had never intended to cause any harm. He pleaded with the jury to show him mercy, promising to use his experience to educate others about the dangers of reckless behavior. However, Jake's demeanor on the stand was not entirely convincing. His apologies seemed rehearsed and insincere, and his attempts to portray himself as a victim of social media culture fell flat. The jury appeared skeptical of his claims, sensing that he was still more concerned with his own image than with the consequences of his actions. The trial was a tense and dramatic affair, filled with legal wrangling, emotional testimonies, and intense media scrutiny. The outcome remained uncertain until the very end, as the jury deliberated for several days before reaching a verdict. After days of intense deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the foreman stood to announce their decision. Jake, his face pale and his hands trembling, braced himself for the inevitable. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jake Paulson, guilty on the charges of assault, endangering public safety, and guilty on the charge of attempting to incite public disorder. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. The verdict was a resounding victory for the prosecution, a clear condemnation of Jake's actions. The jury had rejected his claims of ignorance and remorse, recognizing the severity of his crime and the potential danger it posed to society. The sentencing hearing was held several weeks later. The prosecution argued for a harsh sentence, emphasizing the need to deter others from attempting similar acts of disrespect and violence. They pointed to Jake's lack of remorse, his history of reckless behavior, and the widespread outrage his actions had provoked. The defense, on the other hand, pleaded for leniency. They argued that Jake was a young man who had made a mistake, and that he had already suffered enough from the social media backlash and the intense media scrutiny. They presented letters from Jake's family and friends, attesting to his good character and his potential for rehabilitation. Jake himself addressed the court, expressing remorse for his actions and apologizing to Private Ashton and the people of Britain. He promised to use his experience to educate others about the dangers of reckless behavior and the importance of respecting cultural traditions. The judge, after carefully considering all the evidence and arguments, delivered his sentence. He acknowledged Jake's remorse, but emphasized the seriousness of his crime and the need to send a strong message to the public. Your actions were not just a harmless prank, the judge stated sternly. They were a deliberate act of disrespect, a threat to public safety, and an attempt to undermine the values of our society. Such behavior cannot be tolerated. The judge sentenced Jake to 2 years in prison for assault, 1 year for endangering public safety, and 3 years for attempting to incite public disorder. To be served concurrently, he also ordered Jake to pay a substantial fine and to perform community service upon his release. The verdict and the sentencing reflected the severity of the crime and the public's demand for justice. Jake's dreams of internet fame had turned into a nightmare of legal repercussions. He had learned a harsh lesson about the consequences of his actions, a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The incident involving Jake had a profound impact on the Royal Guard, prompting a thorough review of security protocols and a heightened awareness of potential threats. While the Guard had always been prepared for a range of scenarios, the Jake incident highlighted the need to adapt to the evolving nature of threats in the digital age. One of the immediate changes was an increase in the visibility of security personnel around the Royal Guard. Plainclothes officers were more actively deployed among the crowds, and uniformed police officers were more frequently seen patrolling the area. Another significant change was the implementation of enhanced screening procedures for individuals approaching the Guard. Security personnel were trained to identify suspicious behavior and to intervene proactively if necessary. The incident also led to a reassessment of the Guard's training program. While the existing training already emphasized discipline, composure, and threat assessment, new modules were added to address the specific challenges posed by social media-driven pranks and acts of disrespect. The training program now included scenarios involving individuals attempting to film or photograph the Guard in compromising situations, as well as techniques for de-escalating potentially volatile encounters. The Guards were also given more training in self-defense and crowd control. Beyond the practical changes in security protocols and training, the Jake incident also had a significant impact on the morale and the public perception of the Royal Guard. While the incident was initially shocking and unsettling, it ultimately served to strengthen the Guard's resolve and reinforce their commitment to duty. The outpouring of public support in the wake of the incident was a powerful reminder of the importance of the Royal Guard as a symbol of British tradition and authority. The Guards were deeply moved by the messages of encouragement and gratitude they received from people around the world. The incident also highlighted the resilience of the royal guard. Despite the attempt to undermine their dignity and disrespect their traditions, they remained steadfast in their duty, upholding their values of courage, loyalty, and unwavering commitment to service. The royal guard emerged from the Jake incident stronger and more determined than ever, a testament to their enduring spirit and their unwavering dedication to their country. The incident served as a reminder that even the most foolish and disrespectful acts could not diminish the importance of the royal guard as a symbol of British identity. The story of Jake, the prankmaster global, serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of reckless behavior, the importance of respecting cultural symbols, and the devastating consequences of seeking fleeting internet fame. His ill-conceived prank, driven by a desperate desire for online validation, spiraled into a legal nightmare, a public shaming, and a profound personal tragedy. Jake's actions were not simply a harmless joke or a cultural misunderstanding. They were a deliberate act of disrespect, a threat to public safety, and an attempt to undermine the values of a society he barely understood. He failed to appreciate the significance of the royal guard as a symbol of British tradition and authority, viewing them instead as mere props in his quest for viral fame. His story is a cautionary tale for the internet age, a reminder that actions in the digital world have real-world consequences. The pursuit of online validation can be intoxicating, but it should never come at the expense of common sense, respect for others, or the rule of law. The case also highlights the power and the perils of social media. While social media can be a force for good, connecting people and promoting important causes, it can also be a breeding ground for hate, abuse, and reckless behavior. The online backlash against Jake, while perhaps understandable, often crossed the line into harassment and abuse, demonstrating the dangers of unchecked online outrage. The story of Private Thomas Ashton, the royal guard who was targeted by Jake's prank, is an inspiring example of courage, discipline, and unwavering commitment to duty. Despite facing an unexpected and potentially dangerous situation, he remained calm and composed, upholding the values of the royal guard and protecting the public. The Jake incident had a lasting impact on the royal guard, prompting a review of security protocols and a heightened awareness of potential threats. It also served to strengthen the guard's resolve and reinforce their commitment to duty, reminding them of the importance of their role as a symbol of British identity. In conclusion, the story of Jake, the reckless tourist, is a complex and multifaceted tale that raises important questions about the nature of online fame, the power of social media, and the importance of respecting cultural traditions. It is a story that should serve as a warning to others, reminding them that even the most fleeting moments of internet glory are not worth sacrificing their integrity, their freedom, or their respect for others.